I've always enjoyed shooting cinema film in 35mm, so I had to try it out when options became available in 120. A small business based here in Melbourne recently started supplying not only 35mm Kodak Vision film, but also all 4 variants in 120. What you're seeing here is a few night scenes exposed on 200T, provided, processed and scanned by B2 Darkroom here in Melbourne. So welcome to Pushing Film, I'm Hashim, and if you're a regular here on the channel, you may have seen on some of my recent live streams that I got my hands on one of each of the 4 variants of Vision film provided by B2. And with those opening shots that you just saw on Vision 200T, I used the roll of 500T for some handheld portrait work of a musician that I photographed for a publication called Liminal Magazine. And after getting these scans back from B2, I was really pleased with the results, quite impressed, and I think it worked well given the nature of the shoot, the artificial lights, and having that little bit of extra speed to use the 645 handheld in low light. I also feel like it's great to have a variety of different options in 120 color film, especially with recent ones being discontinued, and having all these different speeds and color balances available through Kodak Vision film re-rolled onto these 120 spools. During this same session, I also shot some 35mm Fuji Superior 800 film, which, although not a fair comparison to the 120 film, you can see the inherent differences between the cinema film on the left and the C41 consumer film on the right, having noticeably more saturation and contrast. Alright, now moving away from the tungsten balance films for a bit, let's take a look at some daylight balanced options from B2 in the form of the roll of 50D that I tried, also in the Pentax 645N. And as I'd hoped for, this also yielded nice results with versatility and enough leeway in the scans for making your own adjustments, as I did in this example here, with the straight scan on the left and my cropped and adjusted image on the right. This same roll of 50D managed to make its way along onto a short-lived road trip that Sarah and I did to Sydney, where I managed to get a few shots, including this one here, which again shows that fairly flat look, allowing headroom for your own editing and adjustment. Now, because this film is acquired from longer rolls of 65mm cinema film, you'll notice some distinct things, like the presence of the sprocket holes, not normally found on consumer medium format film. The general performance of this film shows great latitude, tonality, sharpness, detail, with great scanning and digital editing ability, as I would have come to expect after having shot the 35mm versions of some of these films. And last but not least, let's take a look at some of my shots from the roll of Vision 250D that I loaded this time in the Pentax 6.7. 250D is a film I've shot heaps of in 35mm, and it's probably my favorite stock out of all the cinema film stocks. And after getting these results back, it reaffirmed why I like this particular film stock so much. Great colors and performance, with again, plenty of leeway for editing. Next up were some shots from a little hike that I did with friends to a similar location to the previous one, as well as some everyday documentary shots taken near a suburban beachside area. So as you can see from some of those results, this makes for an interesting and versatile new option for shooting color films in 120. But of course, it's quite a specialized and small scale service that B2 is providing through these films. So not only do they sell and provide the films, but they also offer the processing and scanning in ECN2 Kodak chemistry. The background of B2 is that it's a small independent business based here in Melbourne. They've been around for a while, mainly having started off as a FlexTight scanning service, but later expanding into selling these respooled cinema films and 35mm, then adding 120 and also the lab processing and scanning services. So they do offer the processing with various scanning options, or you can just get it processed only. But in terms of the scanning, they use a Noritsu scanner, which is what was used for all the shots you saw in this video, and the additional option of FlexTight scans for any individual frames that you might want, which is great if you want to use them for some really big prints and you need that extra resolution. So although this type of service may not be new in some regions, even for respooling 65mm stock onto 120 spools, it is a pretty new thing here in Australia and definitely in Melbourne as far as I know. So with some of that background information in mind, there are some variables to be aware of. So with some of those scans that you saw in this video, you might have noticed a little bit of what looks like light leaks coming in through those sprocket holes, which are inherent to the 65mm or IMAX film format that is used for these films. After having a chat to the business owner, I'm not too sure whether it actually is technically a light leak or something along the lines of bromide drag, but basically it's happening during the process of developing this film in the Jobo processor. This is something that's still being refined, with the business still being in its infancy and continuing to improve, with other things being planned like a new type of packaging for the 120 film. The packaging that you see at the moment is supposedly just temporary, and there are new improvements coming up for B2's lab services. I also experienced a few little defects and scratches on some of the scans, which in most cases were easy enough to Photoshop out, but it is something to be aware of with a smaller and even slightly experimental service as I'd look at it with something like this. So even though this is a great new exciting option, these little factors are something worth considering, but in my eyes are worth the trade-off. In terms of the scans I got, they were all done on the Noritsu, but what I found is that some of them needed a bit of color correction, as I've gotten fairly used to doing by now. But this may not be for everyone, and it is purely down to taste. You might even look at some of these shots and find that you prefer the original straight scan over the edited versions. But that's the beauty of having a slightly flatter scan like you would get from some of these cinema films. In the next slide, I actually compared the previous shot to the same scene photographed on regular C41 Fuji Pro 400H film. And again, it's not a perfectly fair comparison since the 400H was shot through the 6x7 and the Vision film was shot in the 645, but you can again see the distinct difference in the general look of cinema film versus regular color negative. I prefer certain aspects of each in this situation, but I generally lean towards the Vision 200T shot. I think it lends itself a little bit better to this particular scene. But I'm curious to know which one out of these two you prefer, so feel free to let me know in the comments. Alright, now getting into the prices and other general information, I'll just save talking too much and link B2's website in the description of this video. But in terms of at least buying the film, I can safely say that this is a much cheaper option than buying CineStill, at least with local prices here in Australia. And the other bonus that I've always loved about shooting the original stocks like 500T is that there's none of that halation, which I personally am not a big fan of with CineStill, but I know that some people don't mind the halation. On that note, the great thing is that you can just buy the film through B2 and develop it yourself in C41 chemistry at home if you're happy and willing to do that, which means removing the remjet layer. Remember, you can't drop this film off at a regular C41 lab, but as you may know from some of my previous videos, I'm quite a fan of processing Kodak Vision in C41 chemistry at home. I've had great results in 35mm, and it is something I'll touch on more in future videos. And remember, as mentioned, these 120 films do have sprockets. There's a little bit of information about this on B2's websites, because what happens is that the sprockets will lie on what would usually be the usable image area of the film. Depending on the format you're shooting, this might cut into the shot a little bit, so it's worth keeping that in mind and leaving a little bit of extra room to crop into your image if you're not a big fan of the sprockets. And in case you're curious, the film is re-spooled onto regular plastic 120 spools and using Fuji backing paper. And because of this, that means there is no built-in sticker for when you finish the roll. So what B2 does is actually includes a little strip of sticker to use, or you can just bring some tape or something with you in case you don't bring the included sticker. So if you're curious about some of the 35mm options, how they look, and perhaps how all of the B2 ECN processed films would compare to a home C41 process, I'm going to cover all of that in a separate video. I also did shoot some of the 35mm stocks and was equally impressed with those. I might show a couple of teaser shots here just to give you an idea of what to expect from the tungsten balanced 35mm films. However, I'll talk more about those and my thoughts on the whole ECN2 versus C41 process for cinema films in a future video down the track. So stay tuned for that on the channel if you're interested. So far, I think this serves as a good test for some of these great new color film options in 120, especially if you live here locally or you're willing to use postal service to try out some of these ECN2 processed Kodak Vision films by B2 Darkroom here in Melbourne. I'm very thankful to Young for sending me these films to try out and test, and including the processing and scanning, so that I could relay some of my findings onto you guys and help more people find out about this great new service. Alright guys, so that pretty much sums up everything I wanted to go over, but I'd like to know what you think of this film. What are your thoughts on the whole service? So thanks for watching another Pushing Film video. If you want to continue the discussion, feel free to join the Discord server, which I've put an invite for in the description of this video. And also, if you happen to like the music in this video, it was all acquired through Artlist, and if you join using my link in the video description, you'll get an extra 2 months free. Thanks again for joining, and I'll see you on the next episode of Pushing Film.